This is why narcissists can trigger sexual OCD to you, and you really need to know. Have you ever felt completely shattered by the abuse in a narcissistic relationship, where your soul feels violated and your sense of self is torn apart? The devastating sexual abuse you endure in such a relationship doesn't just harm your mind, it wounds your very soul. In today's video, we're going to talk about how narcissists exploit and violate you in unimaginable ways, treating you as an object rather than a person. This kind of trauma can slowly erode your sense of sexual identity and leave you burdened with deep, lasting emotional scars. Stay tuned as we dive into this painful yet important topic of healing from sexual trauma caused by narcissistic abuse. Today, we're going to delve into one such response. The topic for today is both sensitive and significant: exploring sexual OCD as a consequence of trauma caused by narcissistic abuse. If this resonates with you, I encourage you to stay with me until the end, as you may finally find clarity on issues that have long confused or troubled you. Before we begin, let me make one thing clear. We're not discussing a narcissist's compulsive sexual behaviors or their infidelity. This isn't about their actions, it's about your experience and your journey. The non-consensual nature of intimacy in narcissistic relationships. In a narcissistic relationship, consent is a complicated and often absent factor. You might wonder, but I wanted to be intimate with them too. How is that non-consensual? Here's a critical point. The manipulation they employ operates on a subliminal level. Their gaslighting and psychological control are so pervasive that you're left feeling like you have no choice but to comply. For instance, if you hesitate or refuse physical intimacy, how do they respond? They might shout, threaten, or punish you emotionally. They could withdraw affection, resort to silent treatment, or even threaten divorce. What does this do to you? It destabilizes your sense of safety and forces you into compliance. Over time, you give in to avoid the overwhelming emotional toll. This is what we call fawning. While they may not use physical force, the psychological coercion is undeniable. They manipulate you into doing things you'd never choose willingly. The emotional toll and moral wounds. This cycle of coercion persists, leaving you deeply wounded on a moral level. Each time you're forced to engage in intimacy with them, you disconnect from your authentic self. You might feel as though you're watching the act from a distance. Your body is present, but your soul is absent. Why? Because these encounters are devoid of genuine emotion or connection. Narcissists approach intimacy in extremes. Either they're passive and expect you to initiate and carry the emotional weight, or they dominate completely, stripping you of autonomy and using you as an object for their gratification. This dynamic fills you with overwhelming shame, self-blame, and most profoundly, disgust. Why disgust? Because your soul isn't in it. You're forced to betray your own boundaries, values, and desires. It feels like betrayal, like sharing intimacy with someone who inflicts emotional harm during the day, but expects you to perform a role by night. This isn't healthy. This isn't how intimacy is meant to function in human relationships. For a narcissist, however, it's different. To them, people are tools to be used, regardless of the emotional damage they cause. Narcissists have an uncanny ability to emotionally devastate you. They can reduce you to tears with their words, only to demand intimacy moments later. Why? Because it feeds their craving for control. It's their way of asserting dominance. I've got you back where I want you. You can't escape me. This dynamic often leads to the emergence of sexual OCD. What is sexual OCD in this context? Sexual OCD manifests as an obsessive need to cleanse yourself of the shame, guilt, and disgust that stem from the abuse. This compulsion might show up as constant cleaning or personal hygiene rituals. Perhaps you feel the need to bathe several times a day, wash your hands until your skin is raw, or scratch and pick at your skin. Everything feels tainted, dirty, or wrong, no matter how much you clean or control your surroundings. For some, this might not meet the clinical threshold for OCD, but the struggles are very real and directly tied to the trauma of the narcissistic relationship. If you grew up with a narcissistic parent and experienced severe violations of sexual boundaries, such as inappropriate behavior or even incest, you may find yourself displaying similar patterns. This can include obsessively controlling your environment or becoming consumed by intrusive, nonsensical thoughts. Intrusive thoughts. These thoughts can be deeply unsettling. Am I a pervert? What if I'm just like them? Could I be a predator? Because you internalize the experience so deeply, you might start believing that you're like the narcissist who harmed you, a user and abuser. The guilt can be so overwhelming that you may avoid acknowledging or touching your own body altogether. Even recognizing the existence of certain parts of yourself might trigger thoughts like, I'm terrible. I'm that bad person. Why does this happen? It's because the abuse was shrouded in secrecy and shame. At the time, you couldn't fully comprehend what was happening. It was only after escaping the narcissist's grip and emerging from the fog of manipulation that you began to realize the extent of the abuse, including the sexual violations. But instead of directing blame toward the abuser, you might unconsciously turn it on yourself. It's my fault. I must be the bad one. No, you're not. I'm just like them. Absolutely not. The mental toll of sexual OCD. Sexual OCD can leave you mentally fragmented, unable to concentrate as intrusive thoughts occupy your mind from the moment you wake until you fall asleep. It's a constant reminder of unresolved trauma that demands healing. If you find yourself obsessing over anything connected to sexuality or sex, especially after surviving narcissistic abuse, you need to recognize this as a significant trauma response, not a reflection of who you are. Healing from sexual betrayal trauma is essential. Understanding betrayal. Betrayal isn't limited to infidelity with another person. It's the act of being used, exploited, and violated under the pretense of love. Narcissists never truly love you. What they offer isn't intimacy but breadcrumbs, a facade that leaves you feeling emotionally starved. Share your journey. If you've struggled with sexual OCD as a result of narcissistic abuse, please share your experiences in the comments. Have you worked to heal? Your insights could be a lifeline for others on their journey to recovery. Let's conclude this discussion here. Thank you for listening. I'll connect with you in the next episode. Until then, as always, let the healing begin and continue.